Senate will come to order. Senator Ulibarri will be here to lead us in the pledge.
Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues, guests. Please rise and join me in the pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Majors, please take the roll.
Aguilar, Balmer, Baumgardner, Brophy, Cadman, Crowder, Grantham, Grantham,
Absent.
Guzman, Harvey, Heath, Herpin, Hill, Hodge, John, Johnston, Johnston,
Absent.
Jones, Kafalis, Kerr, King, Lambert, Lundberg, Marble, Newell, Nicholson, Renfro, Rivera, Rivera,
Absent.
Roberts, Scheffel, Shorts, Stedman, Toktrop, Todd, Ulibarri, Zenzinger.
Please add Senators Grantham and Rivera to the roll.
Madam President.
Here. With 34 present, 1 absent, 0 excused, the Senate has a quorum. Motion to adopt the journal. Senator Herpin.
Thank you, Madam President. I move that the reading of the journal for April 7th be dispensed with and the journal be approved as corrected by the Secretary.
Please add Senator Johnston to the roll call. You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, no. Ayes have it. That motion is adopted. Committee reports.
April 7, 2014, Committee on Business, Labor, and Technology. After consideration on the merits, the committee recommends the following. Senate Bill 152 be referred to the Committee of the Whole with favorable recommendation and with the recommendation that it be placed on the consent calendar.
Senate Services.
April 8, 2014, correctly printed, Senate Joint Resolution 27, correctly revised, House Bills 1057, 1176, and 1299, House Joint Resolution 1015.
Message from the reviser.
April 7, 2014, we herewith transmit without comment as amended House Bills 1009, 1011, 1013, 1014, 1016, 1029, 1061, 1072, 1095, 1170, 1173, 1199, 1203, 1213, 1266, 1270, 1278, 1283, and 1316 without comment as amended Senate Bill 27.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we proceed out of order to take up House Joint Resolution 1010.
You've heard the motion to proceed out of order to take up House Joint Resolution 1010. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We will take up House Joint Resolution 1010 at this time. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1010?
House Joint Resolution 1010 by Representatives Singer and Buck and Senators Nicholson and Renfro concerning the recognition of flood recovery efforts throughout the state.
Senator Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Joint Resolution HJR 1010 and ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Majors, would you please read House Joint Resolution 1010 at length?
Whereas the September 2013 flood was a devastating natural disaster, and whereas 10 lives were lost and many more imperiled as a result of the flood, and whereas local, state, and national fire and rescue personnel put their own lives at risk to assist those in need of rescue, and whereas civilian volunteers also put their own lives at risk to assist those in need of rescue, and whereas many people in the affected areas suffered irreparable damage to their homes and livelihoods, and whereas many communities suffered significant damage to roads and bridges and to power, communications, and water and sewer systems, and whereas the National Guard, the Colorado Department of Transportation, and untold other government, private, and volunteer organizations have worked swiftly and tirelessly to restore access to those dispossessed by the flood and its aftermath. And whereas the Colorado Department of Public Safety, through its Division of Homeland Security and Emergency Management, organized mission assignments, resource management, and logistics for flood recovery efforts, coordinated emergency response efforts of other agencies, including the National Guard and the Colorado Department of Transportation, worked closely with the Federal Emergency and Management Agency, and through the Colorado State Patrol provided security and participated in emergency operations. And whereas the commissioners of Adams, Boulder, Chaffee, Clear Creek, Denver, El Paso, Fremont, Gilpin, Jefferson, Lake, Larimer, Lincoln, Logan, Morgan, Otero, Park, Prowers, Pueblo, Sedgwick, Washington, and Weld counties, and the mayors and other city officials of the affected communities have worked tirelessly to assist individuals, families, and businesses impacted by the flood and to address the damage done to residential homes, businesses, and infrastructure in their communities. And whereas Colorado's state and local governments, the federal government, private sector organizations, faith-based and other nonprofit volunteer organizations, including the Colorado Mounted Rangers, and countless individuals have worked tirelessly to assist individuals, families, and businesses impacted by the flood and to address damage done to homes, businesses, and infrastructure. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the House of Representatives of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the Senate concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, proudly recognize and commend the vibrant Colorado spirit that brought neighbors out to help neighbors, the local, state, and federal governments for their swift action in saving both human and animal lives and in restoring infrastructure, local, national, and international businesses for their assistance in the flood recovery efforts, and faith-based and nonprofit relief organizations from around the world that have worked tirelessly to rebuild communities and shelter families, that the recovery effort is not over, and that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, must continue to be mindful of and address the needs of the victims of this event and future catastrophic events. Be it further resolved that copies of this joint resolution be sent to President Barack Obama, the Honorable Governor John Hickenlooper, Rick Ramish, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Corrections, Robert K. Hammond, the Commissioner of Education, Reggie Bicca, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Human Services, Reeves Brown, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, Mike King, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Natural Resources, Dr. Larry Walks, the Executive Director and Chief Medical Officer of the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, James H. Davis, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Public Safety, Donald E. Hunt, the Executive Director of the Colorado Department of Transportation, Major General H. Michael Edwards, the Adjutant General of Colorado for the Colorado National Guard, and the members of the Colorado Congressional Delegation.
Senator Nicholson.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, of course, all of us knew about the flood right away, but only a few of us who serve on the Flood Study Committee saw the devastation firsthand. The cars standing upside down on their rear bumpers, leaning against trees. The creeks running on the opposite side of the road from where they were before the flood. The gaping holes where there used to be a road. and the fear on the faces of the people in the shelters. But that was after the fact. We didn't experience the flood. We didn't experience the sheer terror of seeing all that water rushing toward us. We didn't experience the fear of not knowing if we had lost a loved one or our home or our business. And we didn't experience the terrible loss of a loved one or a home or all our possessions, or even being displaced for several days. We are honored today by the presence of people who did experience the devastation of the flood. Members, please join me in welcoming our guests to the chamber. And guests, if you would please stand and be recognized for your courage and your perseverance. We have with us today Don Parcher, Boulder County Long-Term Flood Recovery Group, a volunteer disaster case manager, Tiernan Doyle, who worked on flood relief, Mike Walker, Zane Strange, Chelsea Green, Vic Harris, Jamestown trustee, Don Hunt, the executive director of the Colorado Department of Transportation, Kevin Klein, Department of Public Safety, members of the National Guard, Julie Van Domelen, Leela, Beth Center, and Randall Center Leela lives in Glen Haven and was a homeowner who lost so much in the flood. Julie Van Domelen, the mayor of Lyons, Richard O'Brien, the new mayor of Lyons, Adeline Ortiz from the Wonderview Cafe, who lost much of her business during the flood, Mike Rogers, Justin Robinson, Jerry Toney, and Mike Tynell, who are firefighters who've worked on floods and helped rescue people, and several others who've joined us. So please recognize them and thank them for their work and for their courage. Thanks.
Senator Renfro.
Thank you, Madam President. Please be seated and relax. And thank you for being here. And it's an honor to bring this today to honor those that helped in a time of need. And there were so many. You know, serving as a co-chairman of the Flood Committee, obviously we had many different avenues of information, of people, of events to look at, and we got to tour much of the area, and it was utterly, words couldn't describe the things that happened through this event of the destruction and the devastation. It truly, for me, left me speechless and in respect of our creation and the power of nature. And to see the Big Thompson and to have in a couple hours span, 10 feet of carving through solid granite occur. Unthinkable. Unthinkable that happened in such a short period of time, that nature was that powerful to have that water carve our rivers in a new way and to destroy structures, to take lives. Amazing how powerful. But then to start to hear the stories of how people helped and came to each other's aid, that was heartwarming and amazing to see that. Sadly, there was stories also of sometimes government getting in the way and not being able to allow things to happen, or inhibiting or slowing the progress of things too. And hopefully we've been able through some of the bills this session to address those issues. And that's one of the goals that our committee had, was to look at those areas and see how can we better plan for the future. Obviously, we can never stop a flood, but hopefully we can be better prepared to give support after a flood, and better prepared with our infrastructure going into it, better prepared with our information technology, all the way around. And there were a lot of exciting stories that we heard and testimony on heroic events of people, and that was so amazing to hear. The faith-based groups that came to the aid was amazing. The groups that came to Greeley, to my area, to Evans, and stayed and worked tirelessly. I went out with a youth group from Nebraska that had came, and we went and helped just clean barbed wire fence for some ranchers in the Kersey area, and spent days just cleaning and repairing fence. I mean, it was amazing, the destruction and the amount of time that has to go into building back something like that, and that's not even thinking of losing your entire home and the things that happened there, or entire roads, and how CDOT came in and temporarily has put our roads back in northern Colorado, and with the help of the National Guard, with the military help that we had, is amazing, and how we've been able to do that. Obviously, we'll have a spring runoff coming with the snow that we have, and there's concerns that we'll have more issues. And so hopefully we can prepare a little in advance and help through that. And I know a lot of work is being put into that before we hit this spring runoff that's going to come shortly. And we even have some bills to try to deal with that. And we'll see if how we can, help through this process. But it's been an unfortunate honor, I guess, to be part of this. But it's been heartwarming to see the people come to each other's need in a time of need, and that's a great thing in our country. And the cities and counties, of how much time they had to take away from their normal duties and to change and to get involved. You go to Lyons, utterly unspeakable to go and see what happened in Lyons. I guess you could pick almost any place, and we could talk all day. We did in committee, to be honest. And but just want to thank you all that are here today, and then everybody that even couldn't be here, for stepping up and reaching out and giving that hand to help a neighbor. So thank you.
Senator Herpin.
Thank you, Madam President. I represent Manitou Springs. Some people call it a quaint little town. It depends on tourism for its livelihood. And in 2012, when the Waldo Canyon fire hit, it hit right at the beginning of the tourist season and harmed their businesses. And then in September of 2013, the runoff from the Waldo Canyon hit and turned Canyon Avenue from a street into a river and flooded the businesses along there with several feet of mud in their basements and closed them. And it was amazing to see the people from around the area, Colorado Springs and El Paso County and up the pass, come down and help carry out buckets and buckets of mud out of the basements of those buildings. Allow these businesses to temporarily get back into business. And unfortunately, we lost a couple of homes, snow lives, gratefully, but we will live with this forever, for at least a long time, until the Waldo Canyon area is revegetated. And I thank the Department of Transportation for doing some repairs on Highway 24 to help minimize the floods, and for the help that the state, the county, and FEMA have given to Manitou Springs to help them prepare for future floods and hopefully diminish the impact of them. We were reminded that after the great flood, the Lord put rainbow in the sky, that we would never have this kind of thing again. So we pray for gentle rain, dear Lord, not floods, to help us with our drought, but still protect our infrastructure and our cities. My thank you to the first responders, the many volunteers that helped throughout our state, and especially those who came in to help the folks in Manitou Springs. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Senator Jones.
Thank you, Madam President. I had the honor of serving and continuing to serve on the Flood Disaster Study Committee, and we did a lot more than study, as you might know. There were more than a dozen bills being run on a bipartisan basis to help us recover from the flood. But as I've said many times at this microphone before, it's not over. It's not going to be over for a long while. And I think this is part of the process of recognizing that and recognizing the people that did extraordinary things for us during that time. And so I'm going to go through a few people here, and if, as I say your name, if you'd stand, it'd be great. I'm starting with, the other thing that people don't realize, I think, is that you hear about the big stories about Lyons and Longmont and the worst hit places, and you should hear those stories, but there was a lot of other places that were adversely affected as well. So I'm going to start with Louisville. We have two people from Public Works that went out the day of the flood and helped people sandbag their homes and put up pumps to pump water to minimize damage. Dave Nichols and Hugo Romero, if you'd stand. And from Louisville Police, we have Sergeant Abramowitz and Officer Haymore. Now, Officer Haymore, Coal Creek is the town that runs through Louisville, and there's a farmhouse near the town that is down by the creek, and Officer Haymore went down there and helped rescue collies. It's a collie rescue operation. And an elderly female woman, he commandeered a tractor to get in there to help rescue her. From Longmont Fire, we have Assistant Chief of Fire Services Don Higgins and Lieutenant Casey Cloud. And Lieutenant Cloud was out in the middle of this. He was helping rescue people. 400 people were rescued in some level of distress in Longmont. And he was 10 to 12 hours in a wetsuit and a kickboard rescuing people. You might have read the article about the young woman that was rescued from a car. He had a hand in that. 10 to 12 hours, folks. Can you imagine that? I can. That's a long time. Who's not here? People from Lafayette. They assisted those in the flood, but they also spent time with the only high hazard dam in the state that was threatened, Baseline Reservoir, which was actually, they think, starting to move, and is right above a middle school. And they stopped that from happening through several days of rain out in the outdoors. And I got to say, Department of Natural Resource people there with dam safety helping them. And then finally, the same thing happened in Erie with helping people that were being flooded. So if you want to help me thank these folks for the work they did and all they represent for the good things we did, and reward them by voting yes on some bills, that'd be great.
Senator Lundberg.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, my Senate district is most of Larimer County except Fort Collins and a little bit of area east of Fort Collins. So the Poudre River, the Big Thompson River, the Little Thompson River, Estes Park, Glen Haven, Drake, Loveland. So many areas that were affected. My own hometown of Berthoud, not the town itself, but the Little Thompson, which they call at this point in time River X, because when you read all the history about the floods, they seem to miss the fact that the Little Thompson went through and did quite a bit of damage as well. It just didn't go through a major town, so it didn't get major attention. But in Larimer County, we were in many ways ground zero for this. Estes Park was challenged in many ways. Glen Haven is still under siege from all of the destruction of of the floods and so many other areas. And I want to acknowledge those specific areas and the people involved, but I want to bring your attention to one other aspect of this. We certainly and most deservedly acknowledge the first responders and the other government agencies and the non-government agencies and some organizations that literally grew up around the issue of dealing with the flood, and others that just stepped up to the plate. I think of a large church up in Fort Collins, Timberline Church, that has a group called Serve 6.8, and they continue to send out people. As of last December, on a daily basis, they were sending out teams to work with the recovery effort. But what really comes to my mind, and in my course of serving in the legislature, I've seen in my district, back when I was in the House, the Windsor tornado in 2008, and then, of course, the High Park fire of 2012, and then the flood of 2013, and it has been my privilege to serve on the committee that's been dealing with flood issues, and so I've seen those field trips, but I didn't need the field trip because I was there the day of and was watching all the problems, and then in the aftermath, getting up before citizens, and I think of those other times with the Windsor tornado and with the High Park fire, of the real impression in my mind is standing before hundreds of people who are those who were displaced, those who were still wondering about their loved ones, those whose homes had been destroyed, thinking, where do we go from here? How do we pick up and carry on? And what I have observed each and every time is the resilience, is the confidence, and the help that neighbor has lent to neighbor. I think of some of the communities that really weren't much of a community because they grew up as sort of a bedroom community, and it's just a convenient subdivision to buy a home in, that found their sense of belonging as a community through the challenges of one of these terrible tragedies. I'm encouraged by the people in my district, and indeed the people all across Colorado, because when the time comes, they're ready to step up and help. I've been encouraged so many times, and I'd be remiss if I didn't stand before you today and commend each and every Colorado citizen who understands that when the time comes to step up and help, it's our job to do it. And even as we have, I'm sure we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Kafalis.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues and esteemed guests. I rise in support of this resolution, and as a member of the Flood Disaster Recovery Study Committee, I've learned a great deal in the last 6 months as we've convened. One of the things that I'm most grateful about, other than all of you who are assembled here, is that on this study committee, we were able to work together to solve problems, to address the complex issues that came before us. And I think, to me, that's an example of what Colorado is all about, the Colorado spirit, that we can come together and address problems. So I'm very grateful for my time, an honor to serve on the Flood Disaster Recovery Committee. I just also want to thank, acknowledge, and honor the folks that are assembled here. A new friend that I met today from Glen Haven, whose home was severely impacted. I remember seeing a video that was sent to me the first day of the rains, and there was her home sort of on this little knoll, and behind her was the North Fork of the Big Thompson, which was a raging, just beyond comparison. But yet right there in front of her home, which I believe was the road, it was another raging river. And then since that time, seeing photos where the waters have receded, and yet the road is almost impassable because of debris and rocks and things that have come down through from the mountains. So I want to thank and acknowledge everyone and honor everyone who's here, who's been impacted. I think a lot of credit also, obviously, the first responders, and thank you folks for your tireless service and your sacrifice, and your taking extraordinary risks. One other point I wish to make, though, I think that this is an example of public and private sector coming together. With Larimer County, I'm in Fort Collins. I live close to the Cache La Puta River. I remember that morning heading down to go for a run. When I got down to the Martinez Park, needless to say, the trail was gone, everything was gone, and one would have needed a lot of skill and kayaking to actually navigate those waters. And that told me that something was amiss. And I actually remember the night before driving up from Denver and how the rain was falling. There was an event at the Meisel Museum that night. But I think it's important to acknowledge that the different levels of government in their appropriate roles came together. The federal, the state, the local jurisdictions, the Department of Transportation, for example, deserves an awful lot of credit because, for example, with Highway 34, they exceeded the deadline to get that road passable, at least temporarily, by December 1st. So the Department of Public Safety has done extraordinary things in collaboration with public and private sector. And again, I want to acknowledge Serve 6.8 and the folks at Timberline Church, because there's an example of where people step up, hear from a really important faith-based community that is part of Fort Collins, who worked with other players, and certainly the folks from Boulder came to know them through these efforts with the Boulder Disaster Relief Group. So thanks to all of you. I'm glad that we are here to be able to honor you and to support this resolution.
Senator Balmer.
Thank you, Madam President. Well, members, I want to thank the first responders who saved a number of Coloradans over that series of days. Now, as you know, Lyons and Jamestown both had parts of the town that became islands. And all of you in this chamber know how much I love dogs. And the first responders saved a number of dogs during the flood. And actually there were homeowners and residents of the area that went back to the flood to try to find their dog, and the first responders had already saved the dogs. So I have heard a number of stories from those who have beloved dogs about how their dogs were reunited with them when the first responders came back from the flood zones. So on behalf of all of our four-legged Coloradans, I want to thank all of the first responders in Colorado for all the dogs that you saved during the floods. And I know that probably more than 1 million Coloradans have dogs at home. And so everybody in Colorado that enjoys the reunion of a dog when they get home wants to thank you as well for saving those dogs during the flood. And I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Senator Rivera.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this resolution. I would like to echo the statement made by the senator from Boulder about folks in different parts of the state that were affected. We were affected down in Pueblo County as well. Out on Vineland, out on the Mesa, they did get some flooding there as well. And although it wasn't to the extent or the degree that was took place up here north, to the people that were affected, it was just as catastrophic, I can assure you. And it was just as terrible, and it'll be just as hard to recover from. And I'll also echo the sentiments of the senator from Fort Collins when he talks about the businesses and people coming together and government and nonprofits and all the variety of organizations that we form as people. But you know what? That's the key. What did we really see? Regardless of whether it's private, government, nonprofit, we're all people. And all that is people helping people. And that's what we do as Americans. That's what we do as Americans. When the chips are down, when it's time to pitch in, Americans do it. And so I'm glad to welcome you all to the Senate chambers and thank you for your work. And I'm proud to say, I am an American.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. And representing Boulder County and the city of Boulder and Lyons and Jamestown, Nederland, that whole area, which obviously was very, very seriously devastated during the floods. I had the chance to personally observe so many of the tragedies, but at the same time, so many of the triumphs. And I really want to talk about the triumphs just for a minute and to thank so many of the people in this room that were responsible for the triumphs. I'll just start with Boulder itself, because a lot of people don't think the city of Boulder was damaged very severely, but it really was. I live close to Bear Creek, which really is just a creek coming down, for those of you that are familiar, coming down from just under NCAR and coming down between Table Mesa, just where I live, which is barely a trickle, but it became a torrent. I actually went to the store and could not get back to my home for about 2 hours just because I couldn't get back across Table Mesa Drive. But that creek went straight on down and crossed, for those of you, again, Broadway, and ended up going into an area called, in a retirement home called Fraser Meadows. And that there was a driveway down into the first floor of Fraser Meadows, and it ended up, excuse me, in a parking garage where there were about 100 cars that were parked. Well, in the space of about 30 minutes, that garage was totally filled up. So you had 100 cars basically floating. But more importantly, on the first floor, just behind the garage, were all of the most needy residents of Fraser Meadows. All people who were basically wheelchair bound. And I, a couple days after the flood, went and viewed a video that one of the employees had taken of basically all of these in excess of 50 residents being wheeled out in wheelchairs with the water literally up to the top of the wheels. And the incredible thing is that they got all of those patients out without any loss of life, without any serious injury. And then walking through that and seeing the devastation and watching this video, the people there, ordinary just employees, came together and got every one of those residents out. It was truly amazing. Julie Van Domelen over here now, I should say the ex-mayor, John O'Brien sitting next to her, the new mayor, was just sworn in yesterday. But Julie had Representative Singer and myself there, along with my wife, who heads up the Boulder Community Foundation, which basically has been responsible for the flood recovery funds for both Lyons and Jamestown. Took us through, and this was just a couple of days, and the fact that that river had moved basically 100 feet away and was no longer under the bridge, and seeing literally the total devastation in Lyons. And then several nights later going to the town hall where most of the residents of Lyons had gone to Longmont, and I think it was the Lifebridge Church, and seeing literally the whole town there, and with Julie and her staff basically trying to get some semblance of support in order to this chaos in people's lives, and watching this group come together and watching the leadership of Julie and John, who was heading up, I think, Lyons Economic Development Commission at that time, John, and watching all of this come together and then going to a series of town halls that they held there while all of this was going on in their lives was just an incredible thing, too. And I think, Senator, you used the word amazing, and it was truly an amazing sight. And then Jamestown, where another incredible woman mayor. I look at all the women colleagues of mine in the Senate, and these two women mayors of Jamestown and Lyons, Tara Schrodinger, and what she did on a similar scale at Jamestown was, again, truly amazing. So as so many of you have said here, it was everybody coming together, and then CDOT basically taking these towns which were isolated, both of them isolated, and bringing them back in terms of getting temporary roads in so that these people could finally get back to their homes and begin to get back to their lives in a very, very short period of time. I think December 1st was the date given, and I don't think anybody thought, having seen the devastation of those roads, that anybody would ever think of getting there on December 1st, and they beat that deadline. So many people came together, but watching this happen firsthand and how communities and people came together under incredible leadership will be my memory. It will not be the devastation. Will be my memory. It will be the triumph of people coming together.
Senator Lambert.
Thank you, Madam President. We've talked this week a little bit about remembrance, especially on the Holocaust resolution. I would suggest this is the time to start remembering about those events that have affected our lives, the lives of people in Colorado. We live in a very violent weather area, and we're susceptible to weather. Even I came originally from California, and we have some memories of earthquakes out in that area, and people forget. I mean, my grandparents and my neighbors were around the Great San Francisco earthquake. They remembered that. They remembered being there. And they remember the National Guard being called out, which at that time really didn't have much training. It was more of a sort of a local militia, and actually helping the looters go through stores and steal their stuff. I think we've come a long ways in 100 years to have a more professional response than that. But we do need to remember, I lived for 3 years in the Middle East, and it never ceased to amaze me when I talked to a Jordanian or go over to Israel and I'd say, well, are you prepared for earthquakes? And their initial reaction was, I don't think we have earthquakes here, do we? It's kind of like, dude, you're sitting on the Great Rift Valley, right here through the Jordan Valley. Have you seen all of the archaeological destruction, all the pillars falling down and everything else? If you go to any archaeological site, that's because of earthquakes, okay? But they don't really have a cultural memory of even 100 years ago, even going back a couple thousand years, of how many huge destructive earthquakes they had and weather events. This is part of our culture now, I think, in Colorado. Several years ago, my second son, Michael, volunteered to work with a friend with the Salvation Army. And, anytime there's a major emergency, they are usually the first ones on the scene. I don't know if they're first responders, but they're, like 1.5 responders. They're all the time. And for no cost to the government, just on volunteer contributions, they have portable kitchens, and they come set up and they start feeding people, doing everything they can to help. And my son tried to help in that way for a while and got deployed from Colorado Springs down to New Mexico and was there for a big forest fire for about 3 days. They got a cell phone call and said, we need you to come back to Colorado right away to a little town called Lake George because of the Hayman fire. So immediately pulled out of a deployment in New Mexico, drove to Lake George, opened their food kitchen, their portable food kitchen, and started serving responders there for about 2 weeks. Those kinds of volunteers are all over the place. We talked on the flood committee, you know, and it's really been a great time the last couple of years, but I hope maybe this summer we have a little rest, because I went from Waldo Canyon to Black Forest Fire to the flood committee, and these things are continuing even till today. But it is a great opportunity to see people respond. We went to the town of Milliken on the flood committee, and they talked about the mounted rangers. And the mayor said, well, we hadn't really heard about the mounted rangers, but I think it was in Fort Collins they had a memorandum of understanding with it, and says, can we get one of those MOUs also? And so they quickly talked to the other, it was either Weld County or Fort Collins, and they said, well, yeah, here's how you get hooked up with these guys. And within a couple hours, they had about 60 trained volunteer police officers in a town that was completely cut off from the rest of Colorado. There were no roads in and out, and yet they forded through the streams to get there and stayed there for about 3 weeks with 60 people, reinforcing their traffic control, community protection, things like that, for no pay. It was 100% volunteer work by an organization that actually traces its history back to the Civil War here in Colorado. We still have huge challenges in cleanup in Waldo Canyon, Queens Canyon, which is adjoining Waldo Canyon, and Black Forest, but yet things are being reconstructed. If you go through Waldo, or the Mountain Shadows area where so much damage happened 2 years ago, in some cases you can't always see it. The destruction has been cleared, new houses are going up rather quickly. I mean, it's sort of surprising. A year later, you come back and things are, there's a lot of construction going on, but things are getting cleared up. And the tendency is, well, you know, we have fairly rapid turnover of people moving in and out of communities, and in a couple of years, that's going to be forgotten. But it shouldn't be forgotten. We still have a huge problem in the Queens Canyon area right now from erosion. And it may be just as destructive in the long run to our environment and our infrastructure than even the fires were in the city. One group I don't think is in the resolution, but I had heard, you know, we travel all over the world helping other countries. I talked to some folks in Mosul, Iraq, and they said, you know, the number one thing that helps us is the U.S. Army. When they show up, they have food, they have shelters, they have blankets, they have everything to take care of refugees. And, you know, that's kind of what we do as a country. It's kind of rare when somebody will come and help the United States. But we had some of those people. We did say, I think, international participation. But I had heard, and I'm not sure who their names are, I can't acknowledge them, but about 20, 25 volunteers came from Israel for a couple weeks. And I don't think they had many government contacts, but they showed up and they worked with their organizations here in Colorado, worked, did a lot of good, and then left. And I hope we find their names so we can acknowledge them someday as well. But you know, this is we have friends that really want to show their respect and are willing to help us when we're in trouble as well. One thing I found was very interesting. When we were traveling around with the flood committee, as I said, we've had a history of violent weather in the western United States that we forget. And back in the 1860s, I believe, in the middle of the Civil War, there were floods and storms so violent that it basically destroyed Los Angeles, Northern California, and people in Idaho were literally cut off in their towns and were facing starvation because everything was impassable. I know in my own town of Sacramento, the floods were so bad that it completely filled up the town to to a height of about 15 feet, and they had to break the levees just to get the water out of the city. Those were tremendously destructive times, and my point is we need to be prepared to learn the lessons of this flood, of these fires that we've been fighting, because the clues are there. We find in the flooding area through Milliken, through Evans, that everybody said, well, this isn't part of the floodplain. But when we researched that, we found it really is. This is the same floodplain that happened after the Ice Age. It's just going back up to its normal level. So we've had little clues about where these things have happened before. We need to be prepared and know when they are going to happen again. We are moving in the right direction. As the Senator said, I think the Flood Committee has done some good stuff. We've done quite a few bills in the Budget Committee to help the state get more prepared financially to work with FEMA and with other groups. But I think there are other structural things that we need to continue to look at and continue to have a process improvement as we go forward. I don't think we're there yet, but I think working with our the governor's staff, especially, well, we've spent some time here with Director of CDOT, and I've climbed all over US 24 with CDOT, and we've gone up Queens Canyon with all of the DPS, Homeland Security people, and you know, they're doing a great job, but we need to make sure that when these things happen, they're anticipated, our people are trained, that our volunteers are connected and trained, so we are even more prepared for the next time the next emergency happens, and it will.
Senator King.
Thank you, President Carroll. I needed to come down to the well and talk to my brother and sister first responders about this Senate. See, this has been the session of fires and floods. We've had special commissions, we've had task force groups getting together to talk about last year, to talk about Waldo Canyon, to talk about Black Forest. This Senate is here to empower you, and we honor our first responders by empowering you to do what you do so well, but to do it safer and faster because you have the resources of state government. That's our job. That's why we're here, to try and help you and be a partner to you. There isn't a person in this room that is a senator that doesn't have his or her own priorities and projects. Sometimes it's K-12, sometimes it's higher ed, sometimes it's road and bridges, things that they're passionate about, things that they will come and we will have great debates at this well about. But this session, barring others, has been one where we come down and we have worked together on both sides of the aisle to help empower you to deal with natural disasters, to deal with wildfires, to deal with flooding. And we've heard how those two things tend to go hand in hand. Once you have a fire, it's not long before we have the rains and you have the floods. I'm proud of the people in this room to be able to empower you as our heroes to go do what you're trained to do and you're good at and you love doing anyway. But with the resources that make you safer and make our citizens safer, and that are the fundamental pillars of why we have state government. So to our first responders, thank you for everything that you do. But it's a partnership, and I certainly hope that you will thank the members of this Senate for everything that they do. Thank you.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Madam President. So for 2 years, I sat on the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District Board. And after 2 years of approving projects and watching PowerPoints and coming up with funding to look at different spillways and floodplain management, we had the most exciting meeting we could have ever predicted post-flood, where we got to see how that careful management, that investment in our infrastructure made a huge difference between what could have been even more devastating, even worse than it was, because we took the time to plan. Now, the Urban Drainage and Flood Control District was actually established by the state legislature here in 1969 for the purpose of assisting the local governments in the Denver metropolitan area with drainage and flood control problems. And I would be remiss if we didn't, in addition to the thanks that we've already given to our first responders, to the state, to CDOT, to in particular point out the courage of the local governments. Julie, you know, when we were there on Dr. Cog, she received a phone call and 11 o'clock at night from her colleagues in Golden, just checking in, saying, what can we do? How can we help? The mayor of Westminster called, said, the Boulder City Council, what can we do? Can we have people come to Westminster and stay with us? What can we do? The way that the local governments reached out to one another was extremely heartwarming. And I know that the communities that were impacted by the flood definitely appreciated the fact that everybody came together, and I just wanted to mention that as well.
Senator Newell.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of you all here as first responders and also second responders, the ones who come after. I was, during the floods, I was working in Cheyenne on a project and literally got caught in Cheyenne and could not make it home because, of course, I-25 was closed, and so was actually everything else that on my way home. So I had to go almost to Nebraska in order to get home the following day. But what happens in a situation like that is that you feel so out of control that you can't be there to help. And I know that people understand that just being glued to the television and watching all of this devastation and knowing that you can't do anything, you're just out of control at that point, was very frustrating to me and very difficult for me. But what I want to say to you all is that I cannot imagine the post-traumatic stress that is happening within you, of seeing that firsthand, being there firsthand. And I just wanted to say, I am hoping that you are honoring yourselves in taking care of you from that compassion fatigue and those kinds of things that are the effects of what your work is on a day-to-day basis. So thank you so much, and I do hope that you are taking care of yourself and know that we are doing everything we can to support you. So thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Senator Renfro.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, members, for all your words on this resolution that we've brought today. And as a wrap up and closing, we talked a lot of first responders, of city governments, and I know there was a little bit of talk of businesses and things that they've done and the impacts, even citizens, and the reaching hand. I want to give one small story from Weld County that really honestly blew me away. And I went to a luncheon that a company put on to honor their employees for what they did through the flood. And very large company. They took actually Island Grove Regional banquet facility, which holds thousands, and had it in there. And so we go to this luncheon, and the president of the company flew in from out of state to address their employees and to thank them. But the thing that touched me so much was the head of the Weld County Food Bank was there, and they were honoring the food bank for the work that they did. But actually, it turned out that the food bank wanted to honor this company with the words that they gave on how this company was there during the flood. But they weren't only there during the flood. Their employees actually volunteered to the food bank years ago and worked there on a regular basis. So they knew the process. They knew how to process the food donations that came in, how to bag them up, how to package them, how to put things together so that when there was a need, it could go out, because food came in exponentially. And their normal staff, there's no way they could handle that processing, inspection, and then the distribution to the people of need through the flood. But this company, because of the number of employees they had that had volunteered there on a regular basis, they sent, I think, 30, 40 employees. Said, oh, we'll help you gather more food. And they brought it in, and they had more food than they knew what to do with. And it's like, well, hold on, how are we gonna get this ready to give out? Because the need is today, the need is tomorrow. In our instant world, grocery stores run out of food fast and run out of water fast, and gas stations run out of gas fast. And so this company came and said, no problem, we're trained, let us help you. And so they started packaging, processing, and then distributing. And it was the most amazing thing to see and to hear from the food bank talking, without you, without your support before the flood, we never could have helped people after the flood that needed the help, needed the food. And who was that? That was one of the oil companies in Weld County. Not only did they do that, they raised, through their employees, I think it was over $1 million of donations through their employees to the efforts. And Noble Energy, thank you for what you did. And what the food bank, what the president of that food bank, it just, as I sat there, it was like unbelievable. A company was that involved before, so that they were prepared to help during the disaster, and then they showed up during to help too. And so I know there were other companies, other examples, but that one was one that stood out to me through this process. And I want to thank the businesses for the sacrifices that they did. Thank the first responders for doing your job and doing it well and doing it with professionalism and compassion. And thank our cities for the extra overtime that you did in providing services, in getting through the paperwork, in processing, in managing, in decision-making, in everything that people had to do outside of their normal job. Thank you. And thank you for your time today on this matter, Madam President.
Senator Nicholson.
Thank you, thank you, Madam President. We are proud of your resilience and your Colorado spirit, and we know you will be stronger because of your response to this devastating challenge. And we recognize the full recovery will take a long time and want you to know that we stand with you and that we are ready to continually support your efforts in your recovery. Madam President, we renew our motion for the adoption of Resolution HJR 1010 and move that the morning roll call be added as co-sponsors.
Question before the body is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1010. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Joint Resolution 1010 is adopted. Motion has been made to add the present roll call as co-sponsors. Is there any objection to that? Seeing none, the present roll call will be added as co-sponsors to House Joint Resolution 1010. Third reading of bills, final passage. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1299?
House Bill 1299 by Representative Tyler and Senator Todd concerning the repeal of the 6-year limitation on applying a salvage brand to a motor vehicle whose cost of being repaired exceeds the value of the vehicle without the recent damage.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we lay over House Bill 1299 until tomorrow, April 9th.
Heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. House Bill 1299 will lay over until tomorrow, April 9th. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1057?
House Bill 1057 by Representative Navarro and Senator King concerning the Colorado Fraud Investigators Unit.
Senator King.
Thank you, President Carroll. I move House Bill 1057 on third reading and ask for an aye vote.
Any discussion on House Bill 1057? Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam President. Again, colleagues, I just want to remind you why I supported this bill and encourage you to do it as well. This is an opportunity for us not to increase at all the outward-facing fees, but to shift some of the priority, reducing some of the regulation and bureaucracy that the Secretary of State is currently doing and shifting it towards some of the things they're supposed to be doing, and that would be fraud investigation. So I supported this bill in finance. I think it's a good bill, and I encourage you to support it as well.
Question is the adoption of House Bill 1057. Are there any no votes? Senators Balmer, Marble, Baumgartner, Shuffle, Renfro. With 30 ayes, 5 no, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1057 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1176?
House Bill 1176 by Representative Ryden and Senator Toktrop concerning the state audit cycle of the emissions program for motor vehicles.
Senator Toktrop.
Thank you, Madam President, and I move House Bill 1176 on third reading and ask for an aye vote.
Senator Balmer.
Thank you, Madam President. Members, I think it's important that we look at this, and I realize this is an audit committee bill, and I realize that this is saving the state auditor's office money if we do this audit less frequently. But I also think we need to remember the context of this program. This program, which is the Automobile Inspection and Readjustment Program, was passed in 1980. And so ever since 1980, legislators have been contacted by their constituents with concerns about this program. Now, back in 1980, they didn't have email. I don't even think they had fax machine yet in 1980, but I guarantee you they got phone calls when they started this with angry constituents who started to wait in lines for these tests. Now, the tests have changed over the years. The tests have become more scientific. The tests have become more extensive, but the significant thing to remember is that all of the new cars pass these tests very, very easily. It's not even close. If you look at the way the machine is calibrated and the way that the new cars, and anything after 2000 basically, it doesn't even come close to failing the test, and yet they have to have that test done way too frequently. Now let's talk about what that costs Coloradans when that happens. Now obviously it costs each person the cost of the fee. That's one thing, and you could make an argument that this fee is nominal. I guess you could make that argument. I've got a lot of constituents who don't think it's nominal. But let us talk about the other costs that are not so nominal. First and foremost is the lost opportunity of being able to do something else during that time. What else could you do during that time? Well, you could assuredly spend time with your family. Or you could be at work producing and earning income for which your government will tax the income, which happens to pay for everything that we do here. So when our citizens lose productivity, leaving their jobs, leaving their families to go wait in line, and there's never not a line. How many of you have had your emissions tested where there was not a line? I have never been in that, gone to get my emissions test and not had it be at least a half an hour line. Sometimes it's 2 hours you're waiting. And then finally, and this is kind of a new thing, and this is the worst of all, is that if your engine light is on, they will not allow you to get your test done. They will say, you got to go get your engine light fixed, which requires you to go to the dealership. It requires you to get an appointment with the service at the dealership. Sometimes fixing the engine light is an easy thing. Sometimes it's an expensive thing. You know, the many reasons that the engine light comes on there's a lot of different reasons. But I think that along the way of encouraging Coloradans to have clean air, we have gone overboard with this program. We now have a program that is costing millions of hours of lost productivity by Coloradans every single year without any real benefit to air quality. These new cars that we drive now are not polluting the air. Now, it's true that if you've got an antique car, that will pollute the air. And that's a small percentage of the people that are driving vehicles out there that are still driving the old kind of vehicles. The small number of them means that they're not polluting the air that much. But with all of our new vehicles, we do not need to have this test done, and we are not saving Colorado from dirty air because the new vehicles don't pollute the air. So I encourage us, and I realize this bill is just about extending the audit, but I encourage us at a later date to tackle this. This should be something that we tackle in the next 2 or 3 years and say, enough of the constantly testing our emission systems, which are extraordinarily efficient systems that are not polluting our air. And so my no vote today is not a no vote against the concept of moving it from 3 to 5 years. It's more of a protest no vote that I think that this AIR program, the automobile inspection and readjustment program, started in 1980, is way out of date, and we need to update it. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Lombard.
Thank you, Madam President. After that impassioned speech by a good friend from Centennial, I have to come down and say I agree, and I do believe the time has come, if not this year, soon, to reevaluate entirely, and therefore I do not see it appropriate to extend the audit period from 3 to 5 years. I recognize that some arguments have been made on some changes that have been made that will make the next audit not quite as efficient or as effective. But the real inefficiency and the real ineffectiveness has to do with the program itself. And the expense and the time of an audit happening next year as opposed to 3 years from now pales in comparison to what the people of Colorado are suffering under this outdated program. It reminds me of so many bureaucracies we have that just won't stop. I join it as a no vote, as a statement that this one had better stop. If liberty and freedom means anything here in the state of Colorado, let's start right here and now, and by not lessening the scrutiny on this most onerous program.
The question is the adoption of House Bill 1176. Are there any no votes? Senators Balmer, Crowder, Mr. Minority Leader, Senators Scheffel, Baumgartner, Harvey, Lambert, Lundberg, Brophy, Herpin, Marble, Grantham, Renfro, Hill, Roberts. With 20 ayes, 15 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1176 is adopted. Co-sponsors. Madam President Pro Tem. Senator Aguilar. Consideration of resolutions. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to Senate Joint Resolution 26?
Senate Joint Resolution 26 by Senators Zenzinger and Kerr and Representatives Peniston and Duran concerning the designation of April 8, 2014 as Equal Pay Day in Colorado, and in connection therewith acknowledging the persisting problem of wage disparity among various groups.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Madam President. I move Senate Joint Resolution 14-26, the Equal Pay Day, and I ask that it be read at length.
Mr. Majors, would you please read Senate Joint Resolution 26 at length?
Whereas, 50 years after the passage of the Federal Equal Pay Act of 1963, pay discrimination continues to be a real and persistent problem that shortchanges American women and people of color and their families. And whereas as the majority of women are primary or co-breadwinners, pay inequity can make an enormous difference in a family's ability to make ends meet. And whereas according to a 2014 report using American Community Survey data based on 2012 annual earnings, the average woman in Colorado earned 80 cents for every dollar earned by a man in a similar position. And whereas for Colorado women of color, the gap is even wider, as African American women earned only 67.5 cents and Latinas just 52.5 cents for every dollar earned by Caucasian men, the highest earners in the state in 2012. And whereas men of color also face pay disparity compared to the highest earners, and whereas fair pay strengthens the security of families today and eases future retirement costs while also enhancing the American economy. And whereas providing equal pay and offering workplace flexibility help employers recruit and retain the most qualified employees in their field and increase productivity and profits. And whereas to achieve pay equity, we need to combat discrimination, properly value women's care work, develop effective policies and programs to educate and train women and people of color for higher paying jobs, and give women and people of color the tools they need to get the pay they deserve. And whereas fair pay policies can be implemented easily and without undue costs in the private and public sectors, and whereas individuals, businesses, nonprofit and labor organizations, and governmental agencies each have a role in closing the wage gap. And whereas Tuesday, April 8, 2014 symbolizes the time in the current year in which the wages paid to American women catch up to the wages paid to men from the previous year. Now therefore be it resolved by the Senate of the 69th General Assembly of the State of Colorado, the House of Representatives concurring herein, that we, the members of the Colorado General Assembly, proclaim Tuesday, April 8, 2014 to be Equal Pay Day in the state of Colorado, and urge governmental agencies, businesses, nonprofit and labor organizations, and individuals to take steps to implement fair pay equity policies to help close the pay gap for Colorado's women and people of color. Be it further resolved that a copy of this joint resolution be sent to 9 to 5 Colorado, who will send a copy of this joint resolution to Equal Pay Day sponsors: American Civil Liberties Union of Colorado, Blackwell Communications, Citizens Project, Colorado Center on Law and Policy, Colorado Fiscal Institute, Colorado Jobs with Justice, Colorado Organization for Latina Opportunity and Reproductive Rights, Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, Jodine Financial, Jewish Women's Fund, League of Women Voters of Colorado, NARAL, Pro-Choice Colorado Foundation, One Colorado, Planned Parenthood of the Rocky Mountains, Service Employees International Union, Local 105, Women's Collaborative for Colorado, and Women's Foundation of Colorado.
Senator Kerr.
Thank you, Madam President, and I would like to ask your support for Senate Joint Resolution 26. The issue of pay disparity is still prevalent.
Would you please move it?
We move Senate Joint Resolution 26.
Thank you. Senator Kerr, please proceed.
Thank you. The issue of pay disparity is still prevalent in our society, and all of our help is needed to combat this injustice. More and more wives, mothers, grandmothers taking on the role of primary breadwinner. But these women aren't receiving the pay they deserve. Today in the 21st century, women earn less than men in every state of the country. That's not right, but we can change that here in Colorado. We can do better than the 80 cents women earn for every dollar earned by men. My daughter deserves the same opportunities as my two sons. And part of that opportunity is receiving equal pay for whatever work she chooses to pursue. We, and I really mean all of us, need to tackle disparity and properly value everyone's work. We need to close the 20-cent difference that exists in men and women's pay here in Colorado. That 20-cent gap adds up during a 40-year career to over $430,000, which greatly hinders a woman's ability to obtain economic freedom and security both today and in the future. I believe my daughter deserves freedom and security as much as my boys, and I'm sure you agree. I believe we need to recognize that with pay equality. Today I ask for your support on this resolution, this opportunity to build awareness for this cause and to stand up for equal pay for all.
Senator Zenzinger.
Thank you, Madam President. I stand before you because the wage gap in Colorado and across our country is hurting our future. It's hurting the future for my daughters, Sophia and Olivia. Pay discrimination is a real and persistent problem that continues to shortchange American women and their families. Women earn less than men in every state and region of the country, and even when all other things are factored in, like education or experience or marital status or number of children, there is still a pay gap that remains unexplained. Women represent nearly 2/3 of workers who are paid minimum wage or less, and women are more likely to live in poverty and rely on public assistance. I don't want that kind of future for my daughters, and I want them to know that they can achieve any goal that they work for in the public or private realm, and that goal and work will receive the pay it deserves. Please join me in supporting Senate Joint Resolution 1426 for my daughters and all of your daughters, wives, mothers, and sisters.
Any discussion? Senator Marble.
Thank you, Madam President. I come and I look at this a little bit different. I always kind of pull back when I am thought of as a victim, and I don't think of myself or women as victims at all. I kind of like to celebrate the fact of how far we have come and all that we have to be thankful for. And the 72-cent figure pretty much gives an inaccurate impression of the opportunities available to aspiring career women. While some discrimination does occur, it is the exception and not the norm. And it's also illegal. Federal and state laws already prohibit sex-based discrimination. I have some, these are research studies, and one is by Emily Goff, and she does a great job kind of explaining why we get under the impression that women are paid less. And I'll read a couple of things from her, and then I wanted to go to just shortly go over a piece by Charles James Sr., the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Federal Contract Compliance. So Emily begins by saying the statistics comes from a Census Bureau report comparing the median earnings of men and women in full-time jobs. However, many factors affect pay: occupational choice, education, experience, and hours of work. Doctors make more than store clerks, no matter what their gender. Employees who work longer hours tend to make more too. The census report ignores all such factors, so it can say nothing about whether men and women in the same level of job performance make the same amount. I think that's a real important fact to look at. You may have a company with very different levels of workers, and no, they do not all get the same pay. They get paid for the job that they do. And women are more likely than men to work in industries with more flexible schedules. Women are also more likely to spend time outside the labor force to care for children. These choices have benefits, but they also reduce pay for both men and women. When economists control for such factors, they find the gender gap largely disappears. Women have made great strides in the workplace over the past generation. More women than men now earn bachelor's and graduate degrees, and women now make up half the workforce. Hardworking women have many opportunities available to them. They should ignore misleading statistics that claim otherwise. The greatest threat to women's opportunities today is a weak economy. Federal policy should be focused on enabling a robust economy, growing economy where free enterprise can flourish, thereby improving choices and opportunities for all workers. That will help get Americans, men and women, back to work. When I have another little bit I'd like to read from Genevieve Wood, and it is in the economics page of the Foundry. And she states, women who earn more, the 20-something women in their 20s are earning more. Women in their 20s without children, living in metropolitan areas, earn 8% more on average than their male counterparts, according to a 2008 census data. This isn't surprising since they're better educated than their male counterparts. We should be applauding these statistics, and we should be proud of this. Women aren't victims. We're winners. We have come so far. More women than men are attending and graduating from college today, and they are receiving the majority of associate, bachelor's, master's, and doctorate degrees. When it comes to college majors, women and men choose different areas of study. Not all areas of studies have the same earning power, and that's according to a Georgetown University report. Of the top 10 most profitable majors, men greatly outnumber women in all but one. Among the 10 least profitable majors, women outnumber men. Want to make more? Major in petroleum engineering. Want to make less? Major in visual and performing arts. Women and men are both free to choose either path. Obviously, they have different preferences. And the number of wealthy women, it's growing twice as fast as the number of wealthy men. And some estimate that by 2030, women will control as much as 2/3 of the nation's wealth. I think we're kicking some serious butt here as women. We're doing a great job. And it just goes on and on, these things that we should be so proud of. And other measurements of a woman's progress show more positive picture. Women graduates of four-year colleges and universities now outnumber men. 20-something women without children living in metropolitan areas on average earn 8% more than their male counterparts, according to the 2008 census data, which I brought up earlier. The number of wealthy women in the U.S. is growing at twice the rate of wealthy men. Remember those facts. They're short, they're good. We should be so proud of that. Charles James, the Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Federal Contract Compliance, he comes through with some Bureau of Labor statistic highlights of women's earnings, focuses on wages rather than total compensation. Research indicates that women may value non-wage benefits more than men do, and as a result prefer to take a greater portion of their compensation in the form of health insurance and other fringe benefits. Although additional research in this area is clearly needed, this study leads to the unambiguous conclusion that the differences in compensation of men and women are the result of a multitude of factors, and that the raw wage gap should not be used as a basis to justify corrective action. Indeed, there may be nothing to correct. The differences in raw wages may be almost entirely the result of individual choices being made by both male and female workers. Women of the Senate, I am so proud of everything that has happened for women over the last century, and it's going to keep getting better. And for that, I want to not come forth as victims of something that we say is inaccurate for wages and pay statistics, which are misleading. I really want to just give a high five to everybody and say, job well done. Never have I been in a role of work where it was pretty conventional for women. I've always been in jobs and competition where men and I were equal. I've never felt an unequal presence. I was always paid fairly and I always won fairly. And I am so grateful that I can live in a country that allows that to happen. So as far as I support the resolution, but I want to look at it from a more positive point and, you know, just say thank you, women, for all the hard work you've done, and thank you to the men for helping create the jobs that we so earnestly and so rabidly go after and work very hard at. I love jobs, I love the job community, and I thank everyone, men and women, for what they have done for the United States of America. Thank you.
Senator Rivera. Oh, I thought you were just being friendly. Because you're not in the well, for example. Senator, Mr. Minority Leader.
That's the friendly senator from El Paso County. Thank you, Madam President. We support equal pay for equal work. That is really without question. There's no doubt. But I think there's a story, a complete story, that needs to be told as we talk about this issue. And I kind of reflect on something that the governor mentions once in a while. How about we all start with the same facts? How about we deal with the same basic information and then make proposals based on those same facts? My colleague from the north mentioned some of the stats from the U.S. Department of Labor. There's a few more, I think, that are important that we share here. This is from a 2009 report, and the report was commissioned specifically as an analysis of the reasons for the disparity in wages between men and women. Now, I know our resolution goes beyond that, but it's certainly becoming a focus of the discussion. During the past 3 decades, women have made notable gains in the workplace and in pay equity, including increased labor force participation, substantial gains in educational attainment, employment growth in higher paying occupations, and significant gains in real earnings. In 1970, about 43% of women aged 16 or older were in the labor force. 43% were in the labor force. By 2007, over 59% were in the labor force. In 1970, only 17.9% of women aged 25 and older had gone to college. By 2000, almost half had gone to college, and by 2006, 1/3 of women in the labor force held a college degree, and we know that's actually exceptionally high in Colorado as well. In 2007, women accounted for 51% of all workers in the high-paying management, professional, and related occupations. They outnumbered men in such occupations as financial managers, human resource managers, education administrators, medical and health services managers, and accountants and auditors. In 1970, the median usual weekly earnings for women working full-time was only 62.1% of those for men. By 2007, the raw wage gap had shrunk from 37.9 to just 21.5%. Now, if that's the raw wage gap based on a gender disparity, that's what I hope the message is in this resolution, is that we will not tolerate that. Similar pay, equal pay for equal work. The forward goes on to say, however, despite these gains, the raw wage gap continues to be used in misleading ways to advance public policy agendas without fully explaining the reasons behind the gap. The purpose of that report that was commissioned was to identify the reasons that explain the wage gap in order to more fully inform policymakers and the public. Let's get to the root causes of the differences and then find the real areas where the gender difference is causing the gap and address those. Some of these you've heard. There are observable differences in the attributes of men and women that account for most of the wage gap. Statistical analysis that includes those variables has produced results that collectively account for between 65 and 76.4% of the raw gender wage gap of 20.4%, and thereby leave an adjusted gender wage gap that is between 4.8 and 7.1%. So that's the real gender gap, the gender wage gap. Again, that's what I believe this resolution should address. That should be even. It should be 1-to-1. There should be no wage gap based on gender, race, etc. Equal pay for equal work, regardless of who performs it. I think that's what we're trying to support here. Those variables include a greater percentage of women than men tend to work part-time. Part-time work tends to pay less than full-time work. This is a great statistic. A greater percentage of women than men tend to leave the labor force for childbirth. How many millions did that cost us to figure out? More women than men leave the labor force for childbirth. Work with me here, people. You can't make this stuff up. It actually also includes an entire family care component for that statistic, but a greater percentage of women than men tend to leave the labor force for childbirth and child care and elder care. Some of the wage gap is explained by the percentage of women who were not in the labor force during their previous years, the age of women, and the number of children in the home. I will tell you, when my wife decided to stay home after we had our first child, that's when she was making more than me. She was working for a nonprofit. I was working for a congressman. That certainly had an impact on what my wife made. Fortunately, she then began working part-time at home. I think those are considerations that are kind of left out oftentimes in the rhetoric. Women, especially working mothers, tend to value family-friendly workplace policies more than men. Some of the wage gap is explained by industry and occupation, particularly the percentage of women who work in the industry and occupation. It's no secret that this is coming on the 8th of April. We know that this is a movement across the country, and it's also taking place in our nation's capital. President Barack Obama is planning to sign 2 new executive actions aimed at narrowing the wage gap between men and women today, even as the Obama White House pays its own female staffers less than it pays its men. Less than it pays its men. This first executive action will be an order banning federal contractors from retaliation against employees who disclose or ask about their wages. According to the reports, his other executive action will require federal contractors to submit data to the government about their employees' compensation by sex and race. According to an analysis of the 2013 annual report to Congress on White House staff, the most recent available data on the White House pay, the White House paid women an estimated 11.8% less than men in 2013. The year prior, the White House paid women 13% less than men, and in 2011, according to Free Bacon, women were paid 18% less than men. I would, at a minimum, request that part of this resolution include sending the message back to the White House, who's standing there sending the message across the country and around the world, that it's time to look at your own policy in your own house before you start directing others to deal with the policies in their house, to include our house. We will support this. I think it's important that the facts are out. I will shortly discuss an amendment to address my concerns from the White House, and frankly include them as a recipient, since they weren't included as a list of those who will be receiving a copy of this resolution that we oftentimes refer to as letters to Santa Claus. I think this is an important letter to the President, since he is sending a message across the country with his actions today. I'm going to ask for support of the resolution.
Senator Rivera.
Thank you, Madam President. I was here earlier at the well on another resolution, and At that time, I stated that I was proud to be an American, and I truly am. I'm proud to be a citizen of this great country where we are guaranteed equality of opportunity. Nobody can guarantee us equality of outcome. And when we talk about opportunity, I think each one of us, I don't believe there's a single one of us who does not have a story to tell about how they pulled themselves up, how they benefited from America, the opportunities that America provides. And because of those opportunities and because of the hard work and just the luck, we can't ignore luck. We're able to be in the positions that we are. Me, poor Mexican kid from Pueblo, a state senator. I continue to pinch myself just to be sure it's real. My arms are black and blue. America, isn't this a wonderful country? And I'll say it again. I'm very proud to be an American. And I know each and every one of you here feels the same way. God bless you all.
Any further discussion? Mr. Minority Leader. There is an amendment on the desk. Mr. Majors, would you please read L001 to Senate Joint Resolution 26?
Amendment L001 to Senate Joint Resolution 26 by Senators Cadman and Harvey.
Mr. Minority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Basically, I move Amendment 1. Basically, as I mentioned earlier, that there's we want to highlight the fact that if you're going to support this resolution across the country, you ought to at least acknowledge where you're coming up deficient and maybe work towards eliminating that deficiency. I mentioned the White House is closing that gap, but it still exists. The gap is obviously subject to conjecture. We know the gap is alluded to in the resolution as 20+%. I think our Department of Labor report actually statistically changes that gap to a much smaller number. The real point here is that there shouldn't be a gap at all. So if you believe that, you should follow it. If you're promoting it, you should support it. So Amendment 1 highlights the fact that we have a discrepancy in two of our national leaders, including Senator Udall, and would like to include this because our next amendment is going to ask us to actually send this to them as well. Would ask for an aye vote on Amendment 1.
The Senate will stand in recess. The Senate will come back to order. Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we lay over Senate Joint Resolution 26 until Friday, April 11th.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. All opposed, no. Ayes have it. Senate Joint Resolution 26 will lay over until Friday. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1009?
House Joint Resolution 1009 by Representative Williams and Senator Ulibarri concerning a request that Congress restore the Federal Voting Rights Act of 1965 as amended.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we lay over House Joint Resolution, where are we? 1009 until April 22nd.
Did you say 22nd or 27th?
22nd. 2-2.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1009 will lay over till April 22nd. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1014?
House Joint Resolution 1014 by Representative Sonnenberg and Senator Brophy concerning the designation of March 26, 2014 as Agriculture Day in Colorado.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we lay over House Joint Resolution 14 until April 22nd.
Motion is to lay over House Joint Resolution 1014 until April 22nd. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. House Joint Resolution 1014 will lay over until April 22nd.
Your suggestion.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I move we reconsider House Joint Resolution 15.
1015?
1015.
The motion is to reconsider House Joint Resolution 1015. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. We'll reconsider House Joint Resolution 1015. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Joint Resolution 1015?
House Joint Resolution 1015 by Representatives Rosenthal and Gardner, Senators Crowder and Ulibarri concerning the declaration of April 28, 2014 through May 4, 2014 as Holocaust Awareness Week.
Senator Ulibarri.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, we're asking for a reconsideration and a yes vote on the Holocaust resolution again today. Our Senate President wasn't with us yesterday due to illness, so we want to make sure all of our members have the opportunity to vote on the resolution.
Senator Crowder.
I concur with this.
And thank you, members, for the courtesy on doing this. The question before us is Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. I just want to make certain that everyone understands that the minority leader and the majority leader together requested this. So I would ask for an aye vote.
Question before us is the adoption of House Joint Resolution 1015. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Joint Resolution 1015 is adopted. Senator Crowder.
I would ask also that the Senate President be added to the co-sponsor list.
Is there any objection? That sounds great. Thank you, Senator Crowder. Everyone is now a co-sponsor on House Joint Resolution 1015. Thank you so much. Consideration of conference committee reports. Mr. Majors, would you please read the title to House Bill 1193?
House Bill 1193 by Representative Salazar and Senator Cafalas concerning requirements governing the imposition of a fee for the research and retrieval of public records under the Colorado Open Records Act.
Senator Cafalas.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam President Carroll. I move for the adoption of the first report of the first conference committee on House Bill 1193.
Thank you. Senator Cafalas, please proceed with your explanation of what was done in conference.
Thank you, Madam President. Colleagues, on Thursday morning, the conference committee met and unanimously we approved the following changes, which are in your conference committee report, that the House accede to the Senate amendments made to the bill as the amendments appear in the re-revised bill with the following changes. Basically, what we are doing is removing the amendment that was added on in third reading on this bill, which has to do with the research and retrieval fees for Cora. And the reason for that is after some more careful deliberation, we determined that there could be some unintended consequences where you say that all requests have to be the same. So, for example, in a situation where a custodian of public records may decide to waive fees, and they have that option of waiving fees in one instance, that, in the view of our discussion, removes the flexibility of the custodian, and therefore they may feel like they have to charge for everybody. If they waive fees here, they may be required to waive fees here if the third reading amendment stayed on. We're taking it off to allow for greater flexibility of the custodians and to make sure that there aren't higher costs to the requesters. And I ask for your support of this committee report.
Any discussion on the committee report? Question before the body is the adoption of the first committee report, conference committee report on House Bill 1193. Are there any no votes? With 35 ayes, 0 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, the conference committee report is adopted. Senator Kafalis.
Thank you, Madam President Carroll. I move for the repassage of House Bill 1193 and respectfully ask for your support. Thank you.
Any discussion? Question is the readoption of House Bill 1193. Are there any no votes? Senator Marble. So we are in the middle of a vote. We can't do a call, but the question is whether there are no votes on House Bill 1193. So the discussion phase has been closed. We are in the middle of a vote, however. Now, that might work in committee, but that doesn't work on the floor. Senator Balmer, we are on no votes on House Bill 1193. Senator Balmer. Any other no votes on House Bill 1193? Senator Harvey. Did you want to? Senator Harvey. Is a no? Senator Lundberg is a no. With 31 ayes, 4 noes, 0 absent, and 0 excused, House Bill 1193 is readopted. Message from the governor. Any additional co-sponsors on House Bill 1193? Committee reports.
April 7, 2014, Committee on Judiciary, after consideration, the Mayor's Committee recommends the following House Bill 1295 be amended as follows and also amended before the Committee of the Whole in favorable recommendation. April 7, 2014, Committee on Judiciary, after consideration, the Mayor's Committee recommends the following House Bill 1312 be referred to the Committee of the Whole in favorable recommendation. April 7, 2014, Committee on State Veterans and Military Affairs, after consideration, the Mayor's Committee recommends the following Senate Bill 148 be postponed indefinitely.
Message from the House.
April 8, 2014, Madam President, the House has passed on third reading and transmitted the advisory statutes. House Bills 1273 is amended, 1275 is amended, 1321 is amended. The House has passed on third reading and returns here with Senate Bill 146.
Message from the Governor.
April 7, 2014, to the Honorable Senate. Ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to inform you that I have approved and filed with the Secretary of State the following acts. Senate Bill 22, concerning certified community development financial institutions, and in connection therewith authorizing such institutions to serve as a qualified holder and to present a request for full or partial release of collateral pledged without presentation of the original promissory note, approved April 7, 2014 at 1:03 p.m. Senate Bill 58, concerning high school equivalency examinations in Colorado, approved April 7, 2014 at 1:04 p.m. Senate Bill 98, concerning clarifications to statutory language on crimes against at-risk elders, approved April 7, 2014 at 1:04 p.m. Senate Bill 109 concerning the use of the Prevention, Early Detection, and Treatment Fund in a connection therewith eliminating the annual transfer of $2 million from the fund to the Department of Healthcare Policy and Financing for Medicaid disease management and treatment programs that address cancer, heart disease, and lung disease or risk factors associated with those diseases, and increasing the amount annually appropriated from the fund to the Prevention Services Division of the Department of Public Health and Environment for the Cancer, Cardiovascular Disease, and Chronic Pulmonary Disease Prevention, Early Detection, and Treatment Program by $2 million. Approved April 7, 2014 at 1:06 p.m. Senate Bill 110 concerning the General Assembly's development of recommendations regarding new methods of financing the state's ongoing capital construction needs, and approved April 7, 2014 at 1:07 p.m. Senate Bill 119 concerning the decriminalization of certain prohibited acts by persons engaged in lobbying, approved April 7, 2014 at 1:07 p.m. Sincerely, John W. Hickenlooper, Governor.
Announcements. Senator Johnston.
Thank you, Madam President. I ask for a moment of personal privilege.
Granted.
Thank you, Madam President. Folks, I have a tribute I want to bring this morning. I'm delighted to be joined this morning by the folks from the Asian Pacific Development Center of Colorado. For folks who aren't aware of their work, it's an amazing organization on the eastern side of the metro area that serves Asian and Pacific Islander immigrants who come to this country and provides wraparound services, both health and wellness, literacy, domestic violence prevention, an incredible array of services. If you haven't been there, you definitely should. They serve more than 10,000 individuals in a year that come to them for any variety of services. I want to just read briefly this tribute. I'd love to ask them to stand, if you would, please, as well as their President, Harry Buddha-Siddhartha, who is here. And this says, the Senate of the Colorado Legislature, convened in the second regular session, hereby extends congratulations to the Asian Pacific Development Center of Colorado. For 30 years, the APDC has been committed to providing culturally appropriate health, mental health, and related services to the Asian American Pacific Islander community. By promoting wellness and self-sufficiency among immigrant and refugee families through culturally sensitive and linguistically proficient services, the APDC strives to become the premier provider of culturally relevant services, empowering and enriching immigrant and refugee lives. On behalf of the State Senate and the State of Colorado, I congratulate you on your commendable commitment to the legacy of our great state and the Asian American Pacific Islander community on the request of Senator Johnson this 8th day of April. Thank you all so much for being here and for all of your work. Please join me in welcoming them. Thank you, Madam President.
Senator Todd.
Thank you, Madam President. Welcome back. We're so glad that you're back with us today and strong and healthy. I want to just give you all a little heads up and notice that Friday is College Day. So we now know that UConn rules for basketball, for the men's basketball. And so are there any Huskies in the room? No, no Huskies around. So you can wear whatever you would like. But it is College Friday. This Friday, you had a notice on your desk. And so this is Tuesday, gives you a couple days to plan ahead, get out your college clothes and wear them on Friday. Thanks.
Any other announcements? Senator Zenzinger.
Members, I just want to call your attention that there will be a flash mob, a dolly mob today on the first floor of the Capitol. So if you want to join us for that. And then also this evening, there'll be a happy hour social celebrating Equal Pay Day at Governor's Park. So I hope you all can join us.
Mr. Majority Leader.
Thank you, Madam President. Just to bring everybody up to date, committees meet as scheduled today, and just want to mention that tomorrow in the Education Committee, I've been asked to announce that House Bill 1345 will be added to the agenda for tomorrow. That's House Bill 1345 in the Education Committee. Members, just so you know, we're going to recess rather than adjourn the Senate, and that's to read more bills over the desk this afternoon, so you do not need to come back. So with that, Madam President, I move the Senate recess until 1 p.m. this afternoon.
Thank you. And before we act on that motion, Mr. Majority Leader, we have a message from the reviser.
Thank you. I think you grabbed
April 8, 2014, we hear the transmit without comment as amended, House Bill 1275 and 1321 with comment as amended, House Bill 1273.
Mr. Majority Leader, you want to renew your motion?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam President. I move that we recess until 1 p.m. tomorrow.
Today.
1 p.m. today. Thank you. 1 p.m. today.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Ayes have it. The Senate will stand in recess until 1 p.m. today.